Hey, welcome back. I'm Dr. Bob Cargill, the Excavator, and we have a treat for you today. I would like to welcome Dan McClellan, Dr. Dan McClellan. He's a PhD from the University of Exeter in the UK, studied under Dr. Francesca Stavrokopoulou, and he is here today as one of the most prominent public scholars on YouTube, also on TikTok, but he's here today. Dan McClellan, thank you so much for visiting with us today.
Thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate the invitation.
We've known each other for a while, and man, you are just shooting right on up, doing this public scholarship. Tell me first, what made you start wanting to do public scholarship and teaching these online courses? By the way, I should also mention Dan has an upcoming online course, Satan and the Bible, February 23rd. And what I really love about this course, by the way, Dan, is that it's a pay-as-you-choose course. As long as you pay at least $1, you can register for this course and take this course. So pay at least $1. You should pay more, but pay at least $1 and you can take Dan's course on Satan and the Bible. That's February 23rd. It's a Zoom course, right, Dan? And you can take that course. And he's got other courses that he's taught in the past as well. But tell us a little bit about the course and tell us why you started doing online scholarship.
So this upcoming course is one that I think will appeal to a lot of folks who have followed my content creation for a while there. I get a lot of questions about Satan and the devil because that's something that I think a lot of folks who were raised within conservative Christian households have kind of taken into their adulthood with them. Sometimes anxieties about these kinds of things, but certainly curiosity about how these things develop. There's this whole deconstruction community out there that is very interested in trying to understand where this all came from, why it is taught the way it is, and what the relationship to the earliest recoverable ideas were. So I'm going to take about an hour to give a presentation about the development of the concept of Satan. I'll talk a bit about the different figures that are consolidated within that figure, within Greco-Roman period Judaism, and into the New Testament. Talk about how it changed. Talk about how the New Testament is looking back on the Hebrew Bible and negotiating with it. Some of these figures that were originally independent characters, the serpent from the Garden of Eden, Lucifer from Isaiah 14:12, are later kind of consolidated into this figure of Satan within the New Testament. And that figure becomes kind of a catch-all for malevolent divine forces and their leadership. So I'm going to go through all that, and then I always end with about a half hour of a live Q&A. So folks who are attending can ask the questions that they have. And I always enjoy it. I'm still getting better at it. I've taught 3 courses so far. This will be the 4th, and I have a lot more in mind for the future. So really looking forward to this February's course.
Well, go ahead.
About TikTok. Yeah. So that was the other question. I always thought that TikTok was for kids dancing and for Korean kids disrupting presidential campaigns, which, I appreciate that.
Right.
And I started seeing on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, folks sharing videos from TikTok that had to do with the academic study of the Bible and religion. But it seemed to me that nobody was really in charge over there. There was a lot of misinformation. And so I went over and started lurking for a while just to see what the scene was like. And a lot of great folks over there trying to share what they're learning as students, both formal and informal, of the academic study of the Bible and religion. But not a lot of credentialed experts who can kind of call balls and strikes.
Right.
And I had some time on my hands, so I figured I might as well start engaging some of this. And one of the first videos, I think the very first video I posted, was responding to some claims about the Jordan-led codices, which you will remember from a little over 10 years ago. That that grabbed my attention back when it first happened as well. But I noticed there was an audience for this kind of expert analysis within this platform that did not have a ton of expert analysis, at least within this field. And so there was started seeing some attention. People were sending me questions. People were tagging me in other videos where people were making claims about the Bible and religion. And it kind of took off from there. And it's grown so much. I've had a number of requests for online classes, for a podcast, for books and things like that. And I haven't had the time to do that kind of thing until last year. I started teaching these online courses, and that's been very successful and very fun. And I've decided to pivot into doing this content creation and this public scholarship full time. So I recently left my full-time employment, and I have a couple of books in the works. I have a podcast in the works with a friend of mine, and I'll be doing these online courses as well. And started up a Patreon as the kids do these days, and so I'm diving headfirst into this, and would like to try to be a source out there for data about the Bible and religion.
Well, a source for good, because let's be honest, there is a lot of misinformation, and you and I have worked on this in the past. We call it debunking, and that's an ugly word, and not an ugly word, but it's a word that sounds very negative, but it's a corrective of misinformation. It's something that we started like as grad students, right? When, a long time ago you said, and that's correct. But we found there was a need for people to go where the students were, Facebook, Twitter at the time, and then later on it was YouTube, right? Where people were out there broadcasting this information. And then for me, it was, Discovery Channel, History Channel, these places where a lot of this bad information was out there, and that we could actually offer a corrective, that we could actually come in and say, this isn't how it should be. It should actually be we should offer better information. We actually can bring scholarship that we're picking up in the university, and we can provide good information directly to the public. And this was something I always felt that our professors, the older generation, the previous generation, wasn't willing to do. And I don't think necessarily they thought it was beneath them. It may have been something that they didn't know how to do. Certainly the technology wasn't there yet, but scholars write peer review articles. They publish, especially ones at R1 universities. And what they don't do is they don't go directly to the public. They don't go on these television shows. They don't go on cable television. And so we started doing that via blogs. We started doing that on Facebook and things. And I think there's a market for that. And what we've seen over the past 10 years, as it's now moved into YouTube, is the importance of this, because that's where the students are. That's where the information has gone as it's democratized. And now we see a lot of these scholars have not only blogs, but now they're starting podcasts and they're starting YouTubes. And I think that's an important thing. The idea that scholars who have their union cards, who have their PhDs, who teach at universities or who are in the professional societies, who can also reach out directly to the public via all the social media, via all the public media, and can communicate directly to the public to offer these correctives. And I love your debunking videos. They call it stitches, right? Where somebody's out there saying some ridiculous thing. And I love it because you cut and then you're like, all right, let's hear this. Let's hear it. And then I love that format, right? Because then in 2 minutes, you can say some really good information. You provide this information and it's a corrective, right? I mean, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's that was what got me there in the first place is there's a saying, it's a lie can travel around the world before the truth is out of bed or gets its socks on or something like that. I forget exactly what it is. But in order to be able to combat all this misinformation, that is, it's not just unfortunate that folks are spreading misinformation. It is harmful. It harms people. It harms careers. It harms communities. This misinformation can make it difficult for our society to progress and maintain the cohesion that keeps it together. And so I think it's incredibly important that scholars learn how to package their insights, their information, their data for public consumption. Because when we're just, talking to each other at conferences and in papers and in books and things like that, the discourse takes place on a level that is very jargony. You need a lot of insider information.
Right.
And that's not going to make it out to the public.
That's
it's going to be the sensationalism that makes it out into the public and then is traveling around the world while we're still trying to figure out how to say these things in a way that the average person can understand. And I am told a lot. I am able to express these things in a way that's easily understood. And I am still working on that. I can see myself failing in a lot of ways to deconstruct things in ways that are digestible to the public. But I've always had to kind of deconstruct what I'm hearing in the academy just so I can understand it myself. So I think I'm halfway in between the academy and the public, but I think that's something that scholarship is if it's going to survive outside of the ivory tower, I think it needs to learn to articulate itself in a way that's not only accessible to other scholars, but is accessible to the public. And that way, the discoveries, the insights don't take a century to trickle down into the public consciousness, but can get out there and can confront the misinformation that's already out there. So I think it's critical, and I see a lot of scholars who are moving in that direction. And I'm always very flattered and very humbled when folks within the guild appreciate what I'm doing, because I really appreciate the attention that's out there from the general public, and I'm glad to hear that they can relate to me.
Right.
But I also very much appreciate when peers and people who I consider people I look up to in the academy, when they say you're doing good work as well.
That's right.
And I'd love to see more scholars out here doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, and it's important work, and I think there's a difference between going to central casting and getting a presenter, a host. Hey, we need you to present this material that research scholars wrote, and here, regurgitate this. I think there's a difference between that, which we've seen in the past, and actual scholars. You've got your union card. You hold a PhD. You wrote a monograph, right? You wrote a book, Yahweh's Divine Images, through the SBL Press. You are a published scholar with a PhD. You studied under Francesca Stavrokopoulou, which we need to talk about in a second. But you've got these credentials, and yet you are choosing to use your time, to use your efforts to go directly to the public to combat a lot of this archaeological nonsense, which we will also talk about in a moment. You're choosing to actually do this service to the public, which is so important. And I think that's why this public scholarship, this movement towards the public, following the technology, following the democratization of knowledge, I think that universities need to be doing this more. And if they fail to do this, they're going to pay the price, because that's where teaching, education, research is going. Because all of these guys who don't have good information, who aren't doing good research, they're learning how to use this media. And that's not just politics. Yeah. It's not just entertainment. It's guys posing, pseudo-scholarship, posing as scholars, doing this as well.
Yeah. And I think the universities, they're kind of in charge of the setting in which so much of this scholarship goes on. But my understanding, I've taught adjunct a few times, but I've never had a full-time position in a university. But my understanding is, with the committee assignments and the administrative responsibilities and the course loads and everything that goes on, it doesn't seem like there's much of an incentive within the system to engage in that kind of thing. Most folks are out there trying to get theirs, trying to survive.
Right.
And so I think, the university system has a lot of issues in the way it structures the scholarship. But if the goal is to educate the public, and not just the paying public that's coming through the doors, but the general public, I think that needs to come up a few notches on the priority list. And there need to be incentives, I think, for professors to be engaging in public scholarship a lot more. And I'm, the position I'm in, I'm able to transition without too much difficulty into doing this full time. But it sure would be nice if if folks who were employed in universities all around the country, all around the world, had time to be able to engage in the same thing, I think that would strengthen the data side of this. I don't want to militarize it, but this engagement with misinformation, I think that would strengthen our side quite a bit.
I agree, and this is why if I may say, I am so grateful to the University of Iowa for allowing me to do the public side. Would I like to be doing more? Yes. Would I like to be making videos as quickly as you do and putting out that content? Yeah. But I've got to teach my courses, and I've got to do my research, and I've got to the committee assignments and stuff. But they're empowering me to do this as well. There are folks out there who aren't in academic positions, who are doing this as well, who are incredibly successful of this, and I applaud them. I link to them on the Excavator YouTube site. I link to them on the Bible and Archaeology website. I link to you as well. This is important stuff. And so my job is to promote good scholarship. And you are one of them, because you are a scholar doing important work in the public sphere, whether it's talking about the latest research, whether it's correcting bad scholarship, or whether it's standing up to idiots. And you recently did this to an obnoxious person who actually came after your advisor, right? This was somebody who, and let's not mince words, he was being highly misogynistic towards Francesca, towards Dr. Stavrokopoulou, talking about her appearance and talking about her, and saying that takes away from her scholarship. Or do you want to discuss this at all, or do you want to, as much or as little as you want to say? But I applaud you for standing up to that and for rallying the academic community behind it, because that was reprehensible what he did. And I applaud you for standing up to it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's quite humbling, because I know that Professor Stavrokopoulou can stand up for herself, but I don't think that it should be her responsibility to stand up against things that are really a product of the culture that men have generated here. Right. So there's an Egyptologist who was doing a live stream. He's a conservative Christian and does a lot of apologetic work, particularly related to the Exodus, and was asked his opinion on the work of Professor Francesca Stavrokopoulou. And he kind of rattled off a couple of positions of hers that he didn't really understand well, but he dismissed them as very fringe, even though, as I stated in this video, they are quite firmly in the mainstream, if not the overwhelming academic consensus, then at least arguably the consensus, for instance, when it comes to the idea of child sacrifice in ancient Israel. And I could tell that he didn't really have much else to say, because it doesn't seem to me that he's familiar at all with her scholarship, but then immediately pivoted to saying that she's popular because of her looks, and that the public is doing, and this is where he introduces this by saying, I don't want to be crass, right, but suggests that the public is doing theology by cup size.
So I don't care for her work. I don't care for her work in the slightest. But I also think she's kind of a waste of time too. She's window dressing. She's theological window dressing. She's basically attractive. And that's why she's always featured on, say, BBC shows. It's because she's one of the few theologians that doesn't look like an old gray man who's dusty around the ears. Now, that's going to get you an audience. And, not to be crass about this.
You're already being crass about this.
But when you start doing theology by cup size, that's a bad start.
Mispronouncing her name was a bad start. Getting her scholarship wrong and laughing at your misunderstanding of her scholarship was a bad start. Wildly misunderstanding the academic consensuses within the field of Hebrew Bible was a bad start. Saying that she's doing theology by cup size is abhorrent and misogynistic. And this is absolutely pathetic. Francesca Stavrokopoulou has had to deal with men dismissing her and her scholarship only because she's a woman absolutely every single day, and frequently from much more competent people, which is pathetic in and of itself.
Is just grotesque.
Yeah.
And it is dismissing someone who has been phenomenally successful because of her insight and her intelligence and her ability to attract the public attention, not because of her looks, but because she has fascinating things to say. Right. She is an outspoken atheist in the UK who likes to rock the apple cart, and that grabs people's attention. Mm-hmm. And that all got dismissed. Right. So that he could dismiss her popularity, her prominence within not just the public eye, but within our guild as well, as just a product of being attractive. And that's something that women all around the world have had to deal with every single day, professional women, women in the academy. And to suggest that, and, you know, in response, he offered a non-apology and basically said that he didn't do anything wrong. He was a little offensive, but that he still feels that he was accurate in his assessment. And there are absolutely no data that support that.
Correct.
He can point to absolutely nothing that indicates that that is true. It's just a person he doesn't like, who's a scholar who happens to be a woman, can just be dismissed as someone who is there only because of their looks. And all that does is suggest that women, if they are prominent in their field, if they are successful, that looks probably have a lot to do with it. And I find that just abhorrent.
Right. I was absolutely appalled at what he said about her. And then when I heard his apology, I was like, okay, well, this is just, it was something to the effect of, well, if anybody was offended by the things I say, I certainly didn't mean that. No, anybody not offended by what you said is an idiot. I mean, it doesn't belong in the academy, right? What you said was people only pay attention to her because of the way she looks, and that is simply not true. You don't even understand what she's saying. And that kind of behavior needs to be called out every time. And by the way, SBL needs to call it out, the society to which he wants to belong, and that needs to be called out by name, not just some weak, everybody remember to play nice. It needs to be dealt with, because every time it's just everybody remember to be nice, then it continues, it perpetuates. It needs to be given. It needs to be given a face and a name, and this is an example of what we are not to do.
And I thought that the Vancouver School of Theology, at which this scholar had an affiliation,
a library card.
Right, he has access to the digital collection and a title, and they acted quite quickly. I think within 24 hours of the video that I released, I think they had released a statement naming this individual and saying they were no longer affiliated with the school. And so I thought that was a good move, and I think SBL does need to do something more direct. Yeah.
But I applaud you for speaking out immediately. I know that when this happened to my advisor years ago, something different, but when this happened to me and to my advisor, I was advised to just lay low and just let it pass. And that's not how I deal with things.
No, that doesn't change the system.
No, I wasn't raised that way by my father, and I also wasn't raised in an academic setting. Right, I was raised in Fresno, and so in Madera. Doing that, when that happened to me and to my advisor Bill Schneidewin, that brought about a change. Right, that brought about cyberbullying and this conversation that we had about what you're allowed and not allowed to do to people using aliases and anonymous things, what you can and cannot say. And, we had that conversation. And now we're in this world where you just can't dismiss someone based on their appearance or comment on their appearance based on whether or not you agree with them apologetically. It cannot be done. And the fact that it's still happening, I don't understand it, but I applaud you for what you did.
Thank you.
I also applaud you for the work that you do when, I won't call them pseudo-scholars, because there have been pseudo-scholars that just make ridiculous things. But sometimes people who are legitimate scholars, we can use that term, make, let's say, claims that they shouldn't be making. There have been several absurd, I'm just going to call them absurd, I tend to say what it is, claims this year archaeologically in Israel that are unsubstantiated. Clearly, they didn't go through the peer review process. Clearly, they went straight to the press. And this is an example of how this direct to the press public meeting can be misused. But it's instead of arguing this is why we shouldn't do this, this is all the more reason I argue why we must engage with it. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. I think the more that scholars are engaging the public, the more there are going to be those scholars who are exploiting that engagement for sensationalist purposes to advance their own personal interests. And because appealing to some of the identity markers, appealing to some of the hot button issues to the public is going to get a lot more attention and I'm sure a lot more resources and access to resources, which is no doubt what some of these folks are after. But yeah, we have I know the world of epigraphy is an interesting one that is rife with shades of gray and nuances and misunderstanding, and a lot that we're doing is trying to reconstruct things where we can't have a ton of confidence on stuff. But yeah, there have been a number of reconstructions recently, and I think this goes back to the Kiafa inscription. I think that's where we first started seeing reconstructions of inscriptions that resonate a little too conveniently with biblical texts. And seem to kind of be aimed at utility for defending the historicity, the antiquity of biblical texts that the scholarly consensus would suggest were written much later. And so I think there's definitely an apologetic bent to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a risk, and that's something that I've found as I've. Every morning I get up, I sit down, I have my routine, and one of the things I do is check and see what videos I've been tagged in. What am I going to make a video about? And something that always goes through my head is this going to be attention grabbing? Is this going to be something that, is going to get me a lot of views or is going to anger a lot of people? And so gin up a big conversation. And I try to suppress that because I could very easily turn into somebody who just appeals to sensationalist topics and who finds themselves siding with more sensationalist conclusions just to gin up that attention. And that's a discipline that I've noticed I need to be aware of every time I'm deciding what I'm going to make a video on. And yeah, I have no doubt that there are a lot of scholars who are not exercising that discipline as much as they should. And sometimes that means I make videos that don't get a ton of views at all, or that I get criticized for. And one of the things I've stated from the very beginning is I'm not on anybody's team.
Yeah.
I'm not here to say those are the bad guys, these are the good guys. I'm always going to side with them over and against the other. Sometimes I'm saying, hey, I'm critiquing my own team here. I'm going to side with the people who are on the other team from time to time. And that's also a very difficult thing to do. Again, doesn't attract a ton of attention, isn't as exciting. So, it seems to me that there's a risk associated with all this public engagement. And right now there are some scholars who are probably, I would suggest, a little bit negligent regarding their duties as public scholars.
Well, I'll come right out and say it because I've already made a video about it. But with this whole Mount of All discovery, the cursed tablet. I mean, we still haven't seen this thing. And if they do publish it in a peer reviewed journal, it's going to be some very technical thing talking about the RTI and talking about the technology used to scan it, and they'll slip in what they think it says. And And then, of course, what I think has been happening, and I'll just state this, and I'm going to make another video about this, but what I think has been happening is Dr. Galil has then been having to go back and claim other discoveries, like he did with this Jerusalem inscription, which is actually just the inside of an ossuary that was carved out, and he finds inscriptions in that, and then claiming to find carvings on the inside of, where the Siloam Tunnel inscription was discovered, and now claiming to find additional text on the Siloam Tunnel inscription, even though we don't have any of that on the original rubbing, of that. He's trying to now, in a retrospect fashion, right? He's trying to create a precedence for the script that he wants to find on this little 2-centimeter Mount of All inscription. It was so rejected that it was just so absurd, the claims that they were making about now this one little discovery is going to prove the conquest of the land and that the antiquity of the Bible and all of this stuff. And he now needs to go in and find all of these letters on all these other things so that he can establish this precedent for this stuff. And of course, every time he makes one of these new discoveries and doesn't go through peer review and now, I think he mentioned on Facebook, it's all going to be published by Associates for Biblical Research or something like that. It's when
the folks that funded the excavation in the first place.
Correct. And so this is the kind of stuff that, you're not going to see the Mount of All inscription in the books of inscriptions, right? And it's never going to be that. Right. But you can raise a lot of money, you can get a lot of attention, you can recruit people to your little seminary, you can try to mix up some political attention from some of the people in the Knesset in an attempt to try to stop Palestinians from developing areas in the West Bank by using archaeology. And this gets back to the original point. Archaeology should never be used as a political weapon. It should be used to do research.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty wild. That kind of misinformation is able to engage in that kind of those kinds of political machinations.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if they can get that out into the public and generate a lot of attention, then that can influence decisions that are made, and that can result in harm coming to people who have been living there probably for generations, who obviously don't want to get forced out just so some folks can preserve the territory around there and take folks on tours.
Right. No,
as much as I enjoy a good tour, and as much as I would love to see archaeological sites preserved, to try to manipulate the data for self-serving purposes is such a problem.
I think so. So Dan, tell me what you've got coming next. Obviously, you've got your book, Yahweh's Divine Images, which people can buy through SBL, but also it's available on Amazon. They can get it through bookstores near them. But what else do you have coming next?
Well, you can also get the book. It's an open access book, so you can get a PDF if you don't feel like spending any money on that. I think that's one of the ways I'm trying to facilitate more public scholarship, do some open access stuff. I've got a podcast that I'm working on with a friend. We don't have a title or website yet, but we're looking to launch around March 1st, and we've already we're getting some guests lined up for our initial shows. And it's going to be a lot of what I do elsewhere on social media, where we are talking about the academic study of the Bible and religion, trying to democratize it so that it is accessible to more people, and engaging in confronting misinformation and popular ideas about the Bible and religion. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm working on a couple of books, one a little more academic, one more of a trade volume, a public book, where a lot of people are familiar with my channel, have probably heard me say more times than they would like that we negotiate with the biblical text. And so I've got a book that will discuss how the Bible itself has negotiated the conceptualization of deity. Mm-hmm. And so from our earliest recoverable notions of deity in the Hebrew Bible all the way down to, I think I'm going to end with the development of the Trinity, but I'm going to talk about how the biblical authors and editors are not just passing on their concept of deity, but negotiating with it, altering it to serve their own goals, their own needs, their own interests within their specific settings, and talk about how that influences how the concept of deity has changed and how that even influences discussions about the divine down to today. So I'm excited about that. I've got a Patreon that I started that is patreon.com/McClellan. So McClellan, my handle across social media, which is just a phonetic spelling of my last name that I used when I was living in South America, because they didn't like 4 consonants in a row starting off the last name down there. But that phonetic spelling became a pretty convenient handle for social media stuff. So I've got a Patreon where I'm offering more access to content that I'm creating, and I'm now doing this full time. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire. I've got some projects I'm still developing, but I'm very excited to be able to have the time to commit to some of these things that I've wanted to work on for a long time. And it also means I can make myself available for discussions with you and other folks who are in the guild, or who are outside the guild looking in, or who are interested in what's going on with the academic study of the Bible and religion and how it's consumed by the public. So very excited for the future.
Well, Dan, I'm so excited that you were able to spend some time with us here today. I applaud you for what you're doing. I think it's so important. I wish more scholars would do it. But I wish you everything the best. And I want to go to your Patreon site. Could you tell me what it is one more time? The Patreon site?
Patreon.com/McClellan. Spelled McClellan.
All right. And we're putting that up here so that we can go over and make a contribution there. Tell us one more time about your next online course.
My next online course will be on Satan and the Bible. We'll discuss the development and change in the conceptualization of evil spirits and of a leader of evil spirits from the Hebrew Bible all the way down to the New Testament through Greco-Roman period Jewish literature. That will be Thursday, February 23rd. It'll be from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And if you'd like more information on that, I have a link tree in all of my social media profiles, or you can just go straight to dan-mcclellan.square.site. And that will take you straight to the landing page with that course. And as usual, I'm always happy to answer any questions, comments, or concerns that folks have on my social media channels.
Great. And we'll put links to all of your social media channels right over here. I always love that you make yourself available to the public, to people who have genuine questions. And I so appreciate you making some time and making yourself available to us here today. Dan McClellan, thank you so much for being with us, and I wish you everything the best.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the kind words.
Thanks so much. Take care.